The first sound I heard after the fall wasn't someone rushing toward me, wasn't an apology, wasn't even the desperate rhythm of my own breath. It was the sharp, ugly scrape of a record needle dragging across vinyl, a sound like bone splitting under pressure. On the hardwood floor, a drop of my blood slid across the oak grain and mixed with the reflection of Christmas lights, turning the whole room into a distorted painting of red and gold. Next to me lay a red napkin, the same one Ethan had thrown aside moments earlier, still warm with the smell of wine and something much darker. There was no concern, no hesitation, no flicker of humanity. Just my son's voice, flat, cracked, and cruel in a way I'd never heard. "You deserved that. My name is Clifford Barnes, age 64, retired jazz musician, widower. And I live in the house my wife Elaine and I once believed would hold our family together every Christmas until my hands were too old to play a single chord. I used to believe music could heal anything, but last Christmas taught me some wounds don't respond to rhythm, some breaks don't mend, some songs end. Before I take you back to the night my family collapsed like a dying note, tell me where you're watching from. And if you ever believed silence has its own rhythm, feel free to like and subscribe. Because rhythm is all I had left when everything else fell apart." December 25th, 2024. The night the record skipped. I have never forgotten the smell of that night, the way roasted chicken blended with cinnamon and the faint must of old vinyl. It was supposed to be peaceful. I made Ethan's favorite. I set out Elaine's Christmas vinyl Autumn Leaves. I even lit the candles she always arranged just so because she believed light softened every hard conversation. But sometimes, the saddest songs are written by the very people you raise. 7:12 p.m. The doorbell rings. Ethan arrived, my son, 32, handsome, successful, wearing cologne so expensive I could have bought 3 weeks of groceries just from the scent. Beside him stood Madison, his fiancée, eyes scanning my home as if evaluating merchandise. My smile was real. Mine always is. Merry Christmas, son. Ethan didn't hug me. He walked past as though the doorframe was greeting him, not me. Madison offered a tight smile. "Nice place. You've kept it tidy." Her voice dripped with a sweetness that didn't match the cold in her eyes. It wasn't praise, it was appraisal. 7:40 p.m. Dinner begins. The table looked warm, the atmosphere did not. Madison gave Ethan small practiced glances, signals, prompts, cues. And Ethan tapped his fingers on the table, that old rhythm he always used when he was about to ask for something. Then it came. "Dad, I need your help with $25,000. The words fell onto the table like a cymbal crash in a funeral hymn. Madison's smile tightened. Ethan continued. "Madison and I are getting married. We want the wedding to be special, expensive, lavish." I set my knife down gently. "I can't, Ethan. That money is your mother's memorial fund. I promised Elaine I'd protect it." Madison leaned forward, voice dripping with contempt. "So what's the point of keeping it just to stare at it? She didn't call me your dad. She called me it." Ethan stiffened. Anger rose behind his eyes. "Dad, you're not struggling. You have the house. A pension. We just need a little help." A little help, as if $25,000 was a cup of sugar borrowed from a neighbor. I shook my head. "I won't break a promise to your mother." Madison exhaled sharply. "Told you." "He won't budge." She said it like I wasn't in the room, like I was furniture with ears. Ethan slammed his hand onto the table. The wine glass rattled red, streaking across the white tablecloth like a sudden wound. "You're selfish. You never do anything for me." I stayed calm. "I've done more than you remember." And that was the spark. Ethan pushed his chair back. It scraped the floor with a scream, a sound that made the candles flicker. Madison didn't flinch. She only watched, cold, unblinking, as if she had seen him break like this before. Ethan leaned in, voice low, shaking. "You're old. You're useless. And you deserved this." Then he raised his hand. I heard the air move before I felt the blow. The sound was sharp, a clean, terrible note in a silent room. Then the fall. My head struck the corner of the oak table, the same place Elaine used to rest her hand while humming along to my old jazz records. Funny. In that moment, pain wasn't what I felt first. It was memory. Rachel's laughter, her touch, her voice telling me, "Cliff, don't let the world harden you." but some worlds harden you anyway. The lights blurred, the ceiling spun, the blood on the floor pooled into the shape of a broken shadow. Ethan stepped back, breathing hard. He looked at me the way people look at debris on a highway, inconvenient in the way disposable. Madison tugged his sleeve. "Let's go. Staying will only make this worse." Ethan stared for one last moment. "You deserved it." And then they left. The door slammed behind them, a final percussion, before silence settled over the house like grave dirt. But it wasn't truly silent. From the living room, the record kept spinning. Autumn leaves screeched under the damaged needle, the vinyl scratching like a knife dragged across stone. 8:05 p.m. The neighbor arrives. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes, hours. Time loses shape on cold hardwood. But I remember the sound, the soft creak of the front door opening like the house itself exhaled. I thought I was dreaming until I saw a figure step in. Betty, my 67-year-old neighbor, holding her white cat and a face pale with terror. "Cliff, I saw your son leave. There was something on his shirt. Was it Cliff? Are you all right?" "Cliff?" I tried to answer, but all I heard was my own erratic breathing and a dull roar in my left ear, like a distant storm rolling across the sea. The colors around me dimmed. The room shrank into a tunnel. My pulse throbbed against the floorboards. Only one thought remained clear. How did the boy I raised become the man who could do this? That Christmas wasn't the ending. It was the crack. The first fracture in a foundation I once believed was unshakable. I didn't know it then, but that night was not the collapse. It was the opening note of a song that would rewrite everything. A song no one expected a father to ever play back. People say memories have a scent. I believe that. Because when I closed my eyes in that hospital room after the Christmas slap, the first thing that came back to me wasn't Ethan standing in my doorway, but the smell of New Orleans in 1988, rain on hot pavement Bourbon Street at midnight, cigarette smoke, and the faint echo of a trumpet drifting from some club I never learned the name of. I was 27 then, young, loud, restless, a jazz musician living on late-night gigs, cheap whiskey, and more bad decisions than sheet music. I had no idea my entire life was about to change. New Orleans, 1988. The night I met Elaine. The Blue Magnolia was packed. Blue lights washed over the old wooden floor. I was on stage, playing Misty Lost in the solo when the door opened and she walked in. Elaine. She wasn't beautiful in the glamorous magazine way. She was beautiful in the whole room quiets down for one heartbeat way. She stood near the stage gray wool dress, head tilted slightly, listening like she understood every word I wasn't saying. After the set, I walked off stage, sweat still on my forehead. "You play well," she said, "but you play like a man running from something." No one had ever said that to me. No one had ever looked at me with eyes that seemed to see the whole map of my mistakes. In the rain-soaked street outside, our story began. 1991, marriage, Nashville, and a different kind of music. We got married 3 years later. I left the wandering life behind and followed Elaine to Nashville. She opened a small piano studio in our old garage. I turned the next room into a music den, jazz posters, a second-hand mic, my saxophone resting on the stand like a reminder of who I used to be. 2 years later, Ethan was born. A brown-haired baby with big, curious eyes, a boy I truly believed would grow up surrounded by music, love, and gentleness. And for a while, he did. Ethan fell in love with drums when he was 5. He had rhythm, heavy, fast, powerful, like his heartbeat one measure ahead of the world. Elaine bought him a tiny blue drum set. The first time he played, I whispered, "My boy might be a musician." But as he got older, my hope turned into worry. At 12, he snapped a drumstick from hitting too hard. At 14, he smashed a church guitar because another kid in the band played off beat. By 16, the school band expelled him. Reason listed aggressive playing, verbally hostile. Elaine held him as he cried. I stood outside his room listening to the sound of a boy ashamed, but beneath those tears I heard something darker. Resentment. He looked at me longer than one beat, a look I didn't understand then. A look I recognized on Christmas night right before his hand struck my face. Elaine loved Ethan deeply, but she wasn't blind to the storm growing inside him. One night, years before she passed, I overheard her speaking to Betty, who had just moved in next door. "I worry that when I'm gone, Cliff will be alone. And Ethan, he won't understand his father. Betty told me this long after Elaine died. Elaine never said it to me. Maybe she didn't want to hurt me. Or maybe she knew I wouldn't listen. Both possibilities break me, even now. 2016. The year everything changed. Elaine was diagnosed with cancer in March. She was gone by June. Some notes in life stop mid-song, leaving the rest of the melody forever out of key. I lost my wife. Ethan lost his mother. But what haunts me most is that grief didn't bring us closer. Ethan grew quiet, closed off, distant. I thought it was sorrow. Now I know it was the beginning of the crack. After the funeral, I gathered every bit of savings, every insurance payout, every dollar Elaine left. The total came to $210,000. I put it into a single account under my name, but the label read, Elaine Memorial Fund. I told myself and the shadow of her that stayed beside me at night, I'll use this money only for something good. Never for myself. Never for convenience. Never for anything wasteful. This is the last best part of you I can protect. I never imagined that promise would become the reason my own son raised his hand against me. I never imagined money could cut through a family like that. But it did. 2015. The last performance we ever shared. 1 year before Elaine died, Ethan and I performed together at his high school auditorium. I remember the warm gold lights. I played sax. Ethan played drums. We chose take 5. Halfway through, Ethan slipped off the rhythm. No one noticed except him. He stopped, cold, stood up, ripped the headphones off, threw his sticks to the floor. Then he walked off stage. I called after him. Ethan, what are you doing? He didn't turn around. But I saw his eyes, cold, distant, hurt, and furious all at once. The same eyes I saw on Christmas night right before his palm cracked across my face. They start with the days we think everything is fine. My story didn't begin the night Ethan slapped me. It began in New Orleans with Elaine's smile and a little boy whose eyes once held wonder. A boy I believed music could keep close forever. I was wrong. And Christmas of 2024 was only the first chapter of that mistake. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was a white light that didn't belong to any home I'd ever known. Cold, flat, emotionless like the surface of a frozen lake. Nashville General Hospital always carries the same scent disinfectant freshly washed sheets and the stale heaviness of hours that never seem to move. I tried to lift my head. A mistake. Pain shot down my spine up through the base of my skull like someone had struck an iron bar across the back of it. A nurse said something, but her words broke apart in the air as if they were coming through a wall I couldn't see. And then I realized my left ear was drowning in a thick, crushing silence. Not sirens, not footsteps, not voices, just a dense, humming void as if I had pressed my head into a glass bowl and sealed it shut. A doctor entered the room, gray hair, eyes tired in a way only people who've seen too many human collapses can understand. Mr. Barnes, can you hear me? I can. On one side. He nodded slowly as though choosing words that would hurt least. Your left ear took significant trauma. There may be partial, possibly permanent hearing loss. Permanent. The word landed like a drum hit in the wrong measure of a jazz solo. Jarring. Unfixable. I had lost Elaine. I had lost Ethan. And now I was losing a part of the music that held my life together. Some musicians say the left ear is the one you use to hear the soul of a song. I had just lost that ear. I lay there, half the world muted, when a figure appeared in the doorway. Betty. She looked so small, as if stepping into the room might break something fragile. Oh, Cliff, why didn't you call me sooner? Her voice trembled. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. I whispered, Betty, what did you see last night? She swallowed. Her hands tightened around her purse. I heard shouting. I came outside. I saw your son leaving. There was something dark on his shirt. Looked like blood. He hurried into his car and drove away. I closed my eyes. Not because of what she said, but because of the way she looked at me, like she had known for a long time this moment would come. She touched my arm. Cliff, you don't deserve this. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only language pain understands. A little before noon, the door opened again. A woman stepped inside, gray blazer, steady walk, eyes sharp but not cold. Sarah Coleman, Davidson County Detective. I'm Sarah. I need to ask you a few questions about last night. I meant to say I fell. I meant to lie. To protect what little dignity I thought a father should cling to. But before I spoke, Sarah looked at me with an expression I recognized far too quickly. Someone who had seen this before. Too many times. You don't have to endure this alone. Mr. Barnes, she said softly. A lot of parents are hurt by their own children, and they're too afraid to say it. My chest tightened. She wasn't guessing. She knew. Then her voice lowered. I used to be one of them. The room seemed to grow colder. You're not alone, Cliff, but I need the truth. I turned my eyes toward the window. The sky outside was a gray, soaking mix of rain and early snow. A kind of tired winter. I was hit by my son, I said quietly. I wasn't sure if my right ear even heard my own voice. Sarah nodded. No shock, no judgment, just acknowledgement. Thank you, she said. The truth is always the first step. Before leaving, she handed me my phone. They found this in your living room. The screen lit up. I opened the messages, and my heart dropped one beat. A text from days earlier. Give me $25,000 if you want peace. No name, no signature, no hint of who sent it. I thought it was spam, a joke, a wrong number. But now I knew better. It wasn't spam. It was a warning, a siren from the future that I had chosen to ignore. Sarah glanced at the screen. You recognize this? I shook my head. But I know who needed money. She stepped closer, pulled a card from her pocket and placed it gently on the table beside me. Cliff, if you're willing, I'll help you bring this truth into the light. The card touched the metal table with a clean, sharp sound like a piano key announcing the start of a new movement. I stared at it under the cold, white hospital lights. It almost looked like a black and white photograph. Sarah Coleman, Davidson County Detective. A chill moved through me. Not from pain, from the understanding that I was stepping into something much larger than a slap. My throat tightened, and for the first time since Christmas night, I whispered the thought that had sat heavy on my chest since the moment I woke up. I fear the silence of justice, more than I fear the pain. Sarah didn't answer. She simply nodded and walked out, leaving the card beside me like a promise. A promise that Christmas night wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a fight I could no longer avoid. I returned home on a gray Nashville afternoon the same day I was discharged from the hospital. Winter wind pushed through the trees, making them shiver the same way my body did each time I remembered Christmas night. From the outside, the house looked normal, but I'd lived long enough to know the quietest places often hide the deepest wounds. I turned the doorknob. It opened too easily, far too easily. I hadn't locked it the night I was taken away. Betty had called 911. The paramedics rushed me out and the door was left behind in the chaos. But even that didn't explain everything. Not what I found inside. The music room. A wreck made with intention. My living room led straight into the music room, the most sacred place in my house. The posters from my New Orleans days, the piano where Elaine taught neighborhood kids, the tiny blue drum Ethan used to pound on with all the clumsy joy of childhood. All of it lived in that room. The door was slightly ajar. I stepped in, and the world tilted. It wasn't the mess of someone searching. It was the mess of someone destroying. Drawers open, papers scattered, sheet music I'd written with Elaine crumpled and stepped on. The little piano she used for teaching lying on its side, one key broken clean through, like a jaw cracked in a fight. I touched the broken key. It was cold. Cold enough to freeze the breath in my chest. Whoever did this didn't want money. They wanted to hurt me. They wanted to hurt the parts of me tied to Elaine. This wasn't vandalism. This was personal. The photo frame and what was left of it. Then I saw it. A wooden photo frame lying face down near the trash bin. Elaine's frame. I had kept it on the wall by the window where the morning light touched her face first. Now it was on the floor. I picked it up. The glass was smeared. The picture inside was missing. I looked toward the trash bin, and there it was. Elaine's photo, the one of her smiling while I practiced sacks crumpled bent with part of a shoe print across her face. My knees gave out and I sat on the floor before I realized I'd fallen. I lifted the photo with shaking hands and brushed the dirt off it as gently as if I were touching her hair again. There are insults delivered with words, and there are insults delivered with actions. This one stabbed far deeper than any slap. The missing money and a signature that wasn't mine. When I finally stood, I made my way to the desk. My head throbbed. My left ear hummed with that awful pressure as if stuffed with cotton. Still, I opened my laptop and checked my bank accounts. The memorial fund was untouched. But the secondary account, the one only Ethan knew I used for day-to-day expenses, showed it. $10,000 withdrawn. December 23rd, 2024. Just 2 days before Christmas. And below it, a shaky digital signature. Not mine. I'm no forensic expert, but I know the way I sign my own name like I know the tone of my saxophone 30 years makes a man familiar with certain things. This wasn't my signature. I closed my eyes. Not in shock, just in sadness. Sometimes numbers betray you more cleanly than people do. Mark Jacobs and a truth I didn't want to hear. Sarah's colleague and longtime family acquaintance, attorney Mark Jacobs, arrived late in the afternoon. He had written Elaine's insurance papers years ago. Mark is the kind of man whose calm makes others uneasy, a calm that comes from knowing too much of the world. He said nothing at first, just studied the signature, studied me, studied the room, and then he exhaled. "Cliff, this isn't yours." My throat tightened. "You're certain?" He nodded. "And worse, whoever forged it tried very hard to imitate you, but they didn't know you well enough." He pointed to the tail of the B in my surname. "You always flick the curve upward at the end, musician's habit. Whoever did this didn't." The paper blurred for a moment as my eyes stung. Mark placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'll send everything to Sarah, but Cliff, you need to be ready for what this means. Ready for the truth. Ready to admit who would know my habits so well. Ready to accept who would be willing to betray me this precisely. Someone close. Very close." After Mark left, I continued sorting through the wreckage. In the back of a drawer lying beneath old sheet music and a cracked metronome, I found a sealed envelope. Elaine's handwriting. On the front, "Open only when you need the truth." My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside were just a few lines, Cliff. "If you ever feel the memorial fund is in danger, never let Ethan near it. He will destroy himself before he ever understands what money truly means." Her handwriting was soft, but her words were sharp as any blade. Elaine had known. Long before I did. She had seen something in Ethan I refused to see. I stood in the middle of the ruined music room, the letter in my hand, the broken piano key on the floor, the photo of Elaine crushed like something meaningless. $10,000 gone. 30 years of memories treated like trash. My wife's face stepped on. My trust shattered, and for the first time since Christmas night, my eyes were no longer filled with grief. They sharpened, colder, clearer, like a note struck on metal. I whispered not in anger, but in decision. Maybe this time, I have to fight. Not for revenge, not for pride, but to protect the last good thing Elaine left in this world, a kindness I will not allow anyone to destroy. There are winter nights when silence becomes a living thing. It doesn't just fill a room, it sits beside you, watches you, and waits for you to admit something you've spent years avoiding. Everything has changed. Early January 2025. Nashville still slept under a thin sheet of ice. I sat alone in my music room staring at the cracked key on Elaine's teaching piano, a wound someone had carved not into wood but into my memory of her. I had lived a gentle life. But gentle does not mean naive, and silence does not mean surrender. That was the night I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I set a trap. The hidden recorder left where only the guilty would look. Elaine once told me the piano was the heart of our home. Ethan knew that, which meant if he ever returned to finish what he started, he'd come here. I held a small recorder no bigger than my thumb, slid in a fresh battery, watched the green indicator blink. Then I opened the piano lid and tucked the device between two support beams right beneath the crack. Invisible. Unreachable unless someone tore through the room the way they had before. I closed the lid. The room seemed to inhale like it understood a new kind of listening had begun, and then I waited. My phone buzzed at 10:14 p.m. Ethan. His name lit the screen like a bruise. Half of me didn't want to pick up, but the other half, the half that saw Elaine's photo thrown into a trash can, knew I had to. I answered. Dad. His voice, a little shaky, but wrapped in self-appointed authority. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. He inhaled hard and then, if you don't give me the money, you're going to regret it. Not a plea, not an explanation, not even manipulation. A threat. From my son. I surprised myself with how steady I was. No, I said. Slow. Measured. Like placing brick after brick into place. You owe yourself kindness, Ethan, not me. He said nothing. Just silence, the kind that's more dangerous than any shouting. Then the call cut off. The next morning, Mark Jacobs and Detective Sarah Coleman came to my home. We sat in the living room. A small speaker rested on the table between us. Sarah pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, raw, arrogant, drunk on the fantasy that he still had power over me. If you don't give me the money, you'll regret it. Mark leaned back, exhaled. Cliff, this is extortion. This isn't just a family argument anymore. Sarah nodded. You're not alone in this anymore. Not now. My eyes drifted toward the piano, toward the crack, toward the little recorder hidden beneath it. It hadn't captured a crime. It had captured who Ethan had become. My heart cooled a degree. An hour after Sarah and Mark left, my phone vibrated again. A text. Madison. For a moment I hesitated. She had always stood at Ethan's side with the same sharp gaze, the same hunger for something shiny. But her message made my chest tighten. Cliff, I need to talk. Please, I replied. What is it? Her answer came instantly. Ethan lied to me about so many things. He's been tracking everything you own on his laptop. A second message, a photo, a screenshot, a folder titled Dad Assets. Inside were photos of my house account info notes about the memorial fund layouts of my music room, old insurance records, even a picture of my vintage saxophone, Madison added. I think he's planning something. I'm so sorry, Cliff. I didn't understand how dark things were. I sat down slowly, the room tilting. Ethan wasn't just desperate. He was studying me like a man preparing to dismantle a target. Looking at that folder, a memory I'd buried deep clawed its way back up. 2019. Ethan, 26. A call at 2 a.m. Mr. Barnes, your son has been arrested for DUI. He hit a street lamp. No injuries, but I drove to the precinct immediately. Ethan could barely stand. His eyes were red, glassy, confused. Dad, please, don't tell Mom. Elaine was sick at the time. Fragile. I bailed him out, paid the fees, hired a lawyer, had the record sealed. Then I went home and told Elaine he had stayed at a friend's house. I thought I was protecting him, but really I was teaching him that he could burn every bridge and still expect me to rebuild it for him. There is no lesson more poisonous than that. That night when the house was finally quiet again, I opened an old cabinet of Elaine's, searching for any documents I might have missed. And that's when I found it. Her life insurance policy. I hadn't looked at it since the year she died. I opened to the last page. Beneficiary, Ethan Barnes. Not me. Not the husband who held her when she passed. Not the partner she built a life with. Ethan. The page slipped from my hand, landing with a soft crackle that felt like fabric tearing. Elaine had seen something in him long before I allowed myself to. I picked up the paper again. My hand shook, but my voice did not. Turns out, I handed a knife to someone willing to use it. That night, for the first time, I understood something painful and simple. Ethan wasn't just lost. He was walking straight toward a cliff edge, and I had spent years keeping him from ever feeling the ground give way. Now I had to decide, would I drag him back, or would I let him face the darkness he created with his own hands? There are truths that don't arrive with explosions. They don't shatter glass or slam doors. They seep quiet as dripping water under a floor until one day you realize everything beneath your feet has already rotted through. By early January 2025, Nashville was locked in a deep freeze. The world outside my windows looked colorless, like someone had drained the last warmth from the city. Every morning I woke with my left ear filled with a heavy dead hum. Every night I felt the same sensation, as if someone somewhere near my life was watching or waiting. It took only a few days to learn that feeling wasn't paranoia. It was warning. One cold Monday afternoon, a knock sounded at my door. Sharp, firm, not the kind of knock delivered by someone uncertain. Detective Sarah Coleman stood there, coat still dusted with frost, expression steady, unreadable. She carried a large folder. The edges were frayed from being handled far too many times. Without a word, she stepped inside and placed it on my kitchen table. It made a sound, a heavy, dull thud, like truth itself had weight. "Cliff," she said, "I need you to see this." I sat down slowly. She opened the folder. The first page was a mugshot. A man with a shaved head, arms covered in tattoos, and eyes that looked like they'd seen the inside of too many bad nights. Printed beneath him, Tony Russo, manager, Crown Line Underground Casino, Cleveland. I felt my forehead crease. I've never met him. Sarah didn't blink, but Ethan has. The kitchen felt smaller. She flipped a page, a transcript of an interview. She tapped her finger on one highlighted sentence. The kid said his dad had money. Older guy, easy to pressure, just needed him to sign. My chest tightened. Hearing Ethan's name tied to a man like that was bad enough, but hearing myself described as old and easy to pressure was a wound all its own. I swallowed hard. Why, I whispered. What made him think he could do that? Sarah didn't soften. Debt, bad choices. Desperation brings people to dark places, Cliff. But your son isn't just drowning, he's dragging others down with him. Betty's camera, the voice of a stranger, wearing my son's face. Sarah wasn't finished. She pulled out a small speaker and pressed play. This is from your neighbor Betty's backdoor camera. Christmas Eve. The audio hissed, wind slamming against the mic. Then footsteps. Heavy ones. Crushing gravel like bones. And then Ethan's voice. Except it wasn't the voice I knew. Not the boy tapping out rhythms on a plastic drum set. Not the teenager frustrated with school bands. It was darker, sharper, as if resentment had finally found a tongue. I'm going to take what's mine. The room felt colder. It wasn't yelled. It wasn't frantic. It was a promise. Sarah watched my face carefully. He wasn't angry, Cliff. He wasn't lashing out. He was planning. The jogger's testimony. A shadow at dawn. Next, Sarah handed me a report. A woman who lived 2 houses down claimed she saw Ethan early on December 26th. The sky was still dark. No cars, no neighbors. But Ethan stood at the end of my driveway, motionless, hands in his pockets, staring at my house. Like he was measuring something, the witness said. Evaluating, calculating. Not the anger of a moment. The preparation of intention. The blood on the floor, and the truth. No father wants. Later that week, Sarah and a forensic technician came to inspect my music room. The room looked untouched at first glance, as if the chaos had settled into a deceptive stillness. But Sarah knelt near the center of the floor. A small, dark stain, the color of dried earth, or old wine. But Sarah's voice was crisp blood. My stomach sank. "It's not yours," she added softly. "This spot is too far from where you fell." They collected a sample. 2 days later, my phone rang. Cliff, Sarah said the DNA analysis came back. It matches Ethan. I had to sit down. Not from shock. Shock had passed. This was something colder. The quiet realization that every illusion I'd held on to had finally collapsed. Ethan hadn't just lost control. He had come back. He had searched the room. He had torn through memories, violated the last pieces of Elaine left in the world, and left behind his own blood in the wreckage. Nothing accidental, nothing impulsive. Intent. The recorder. A son's threat turned into evidence. That night I didn't turn on the lights. The house was dim, cut into silver angles by moonlight spilling through the blinds. I sat at the piano, my hand drifting to the cracked F key, the one Ethan had broken. My finger touched it lightly, and a tiny click echoed under the lid. The The recorder I'd hidden there came alive. A green light glowed faintly beneath the wood. Then it played. Not the phone call. A different recording captured on the night he'd come back. Ethan's voice rose through the empty room. "I'll make sure you never have peace. Not rage, not confusion. Resolved. Deliberate." I let the words fade. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. After a moment, I exhaled the breath I didn't know I'd been holding and whispered, "Looks like I finally have the piece of music that will convict you. Not a melody, not jazz, not the sound of the life I wanted, but the truth clear as a broken chord. And sometimes you have to listen to the ugliest notes of your life before you can play the ones that will save you. There are mornings when a person wakes up and simply knows something terrible is coming. Not because of omens, not because of intuition, but because every dark piece of the puzzle is already on the table, just waiting for the slightest breeze to collapse everything." March 2025. Nashville was still gray and cold, as if winter refused to leave. I brewed a cup of coffee. My left hand trembled, my damaged hearing still not fully recovered. That was when the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Madison stood there. No heavy makeup, no sharp gaze, no controlled, poised future bride, just a young woman whose world had cracked open overnight. "Cliff." Her voice broke on the first syllable. I let her in. She sat on the living room couch, fingers twisted together until her knuckles went white. I need to tell you something." I waited. "Ethan said that if you died, he'd get the money." Her voice trembled. He said it like it was a plan. My heart dropped into a place I didn't know I had left. Madison wiped her face. I knew he'd changed, but I didn't know he was capable of this. She swallowed hard. "I can't marry a man like that." "I'm scared, Cliff. Truly scared." I looked at her, not with anger, not with blame, only pity. Ethan had pulled her into his darkness, and now she was trying to crawl out when the light was nearly gone. But before I could speak, she whispered, "My mother, she still wants the wedding. She says family image matters." Her face crumpled. "I know it's wrong, but I can't stop it. I can't." I nodded. I'd seen lives destroyed by saving face. This wasn't new. The night before the wedding, a ghost caught on camera. That night, long after the house fell silent, my phone buzzed a motion alert from the front door camera. I opened the app. Ethan, standing in front of my house. The porch light cast harsh shadows across his face, a face too familiar and too foreign at the same time. He leaned forward, wrapped his hand around the doorknob. Twisted. The lock held. He tried again, harder. The metal clattered softly, a sound I will never forget. Then he muttered to himself, barely audible, "I'll get what's mine. One way or another." I stood there in the darkness of my living room, watching a stranger try to break into my life. I sent the video to Sarah. 3 minutes later, she called. "Mr. Barnes, go to the wedding." Her voice was steady, almost cold. "Justice will play its own music." I hung up, set my phone on the table. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel fear. I only felt tired, the kind of tired that quiets anger into something sharper, something still, something ready. The envelope, a gift of truth. Late that night, I stepped into my music room. Golden lamplight warmed the old wood. For a moment, it smelled like a Lane piano polish, lavender faint perfume. I opened the drawer Ethan had ransacked. Bank statements, forgery reports, fake signatures, screenshots, printouts, everything. I gathered all of it, every ugly piece of truth he had created. I placed them into a large white envelope, sealed it. On the front, I wrote, "For Ethan's wedding. Not a gift, not congratulations, but consequence. Honest, brutal consequence." I pressed a red wax seal onto it, almost ceremonial, like scoring the final chord of a song I never wanted to write. The next day, Franklin was covered in dark clouds, the kind of sky that warned rain was coming. I put on a gray suit, the one Elaine once said makes you look like a man who knows what he's doing. White shirt, black tie. In the mirror, I saw a man older than 64, tired, quieter, but clearer, sharper than I'd been in years. I slipped the envelope into my hand. In my jacket pocket, I tucked Elaine's note, "Don't let Ethan destroy you." Then I stepped outside and locked the door. Today wasn't their day. Today was the day truth walked into the room of gold and lies. The wedding venue glowed warm with chandeliers. Guests laughed. Servers moved like dancers. Flowers perfumed the air. Ethan was smiling that polished, charming smile he had learned to use like a weapon. Madison stood beside him, shoulders tight, eyes hollow. I walked toward them. Ethan turned. His expression froze into something cold and sharp. "Dad," he said, "glad you made it. Did you bring a gift?" His voice dripped superiority. I handed him the envelope. His fingers trembled, not with emotion, but greed. He opened it. And instead of cash, he pulled out the bank fraud report, the memorial fund statements, the forged signatures, the dad assets folder, printouts, the camera footage, the unauthorized $10,000 withdrawal, every incriminating scrap of paper. He looked at me. His eyes flickered confidence, fear, rage. Before he could speak, I stepped closer and said softly, just for him, "I didn't bring you money, Ethan. I brought you the truth. Some ceremonies look heavenly from afar, but the closer you walk toward them, the more clearly you hear the ropes holding the stage together begin to snap." Ethan and Madison's wedding in Franklin was exactly that, a 5-star hotel, white flowers covering the entire entrance, a live orchestra, a wedding cake so tall I had to tilt my head back to see the top tier. But to me, all of it was nothing more than a backdrop, a pretty curtain hiding a storm that had already started. A banquet attendant forced a tight smile at me. "Mr. Barnes." "This way, please." She led me to the very last table next to the DJ booth near the door where servers dumped trays of dirty glasses. I looked around. No familiar faces. No family. No one who knew Elaine. No one who cared. Just the table where people place the guests they don't know what to do with. The perfect seat for a father considered an inconvenience. I sat, placed the white envelope on the table. No one greeted me. No one noticed me. And I realized sometimes isolation is the clearest answer to how someone truly sees you. The moment of gift-giving began. Ethan and Madison walked to the center of the room, smiling wide enough for the lights to glitter off their teeth. The MC called each name, then mine. Mr. Clifford Barnes. The room fell almost silent, not out of respect, but curiosity. Everyone wanted to see what the broke father of the groom brought. I stepped up, handed the envelope over. Madison opened it. Ethan too busy performing for the guests to notice. I saw her hands tremble the instant the first document slid out. This is your mother's memorial fund." Her voice cracked loudly enough that heads turned. Ethan's smile broke. Madison pulled out the rest bank fraud reports, forged signatures, the unauthorized $10,000 withdrawal, the screenshot of the dad assets folder, the front door camera footage, the audio transcript from the piano recording. They scattered like clues from a crime thriller dropped into a wedding hall. Someone gasped. A woman covered her mouth. Madison's mother turned ghost white. Her father shot up from his chair. Ethan stammered, No, this isn't someone set me up." And then the ballroom doors burst open. A woman in a navy pantsuit stepped inside with purpose. I knew her immediately. The bank manager Mark had contacted. She lifted a file. "My name is Sandra Pierce, First Bank, Franklin. I was asked to verify several suspicious transactions." The air thickened like drying cement. She opened the folder, eyes locking on Ethan. "The signature on the December 23rd transfer is forged." A wave of shock rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Right at his own wedding, I stood still. A lifetime of music teaches you when a song is about to fall off a cliff. This was that moment. And Ethan finally lost control. "Everyone just shut up, this is my wedding." He slammed his hand into the champagne table. The entire display collapsed. Glasses shattered in a piercing crash. Champagne splashed across a bridesmaid's dress. A child started crying. A guest slipped and nearly fell. The ballroom dissolved into chaos. Madison's father roared, "I will not let my daughter marry a monster like you." Ethan turned toward me, eyes bloodshot, breath shaking. You destroyed my life. I answered softly. No, Ethan. I simply brought the truth to where it belonged. He grabbed the collar of my suit jacket and yanked me forward. Guests screamed. A bridesmaid covered her face in horror. Ethan leaned into my right ear, the one I could still hear with, and growled, "I will make sure you never know peace." His voice wasn't trembling from fear. It was trembling because his entire manufactured life had just collapsed in front of every witness he cared about. Someone's recording. Oh my God, it's all on camera. A guest live streaming on TikTok had captured everything. Ethan flipping the champagne table, Ethan screaming, Ethan grabbing me by the collar, Madison sobbing uncontrollably, Madison's father shouting, the bank manager announcing the forgery. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. By the next morning, #FranklinWedding. Meltdown was the #1 hashtag in Tennessee. I walked out of the ballroom, didn't look back. Outside, the Franklin sky finally broke open, rain pouring down in sheets. Cold, relentless, cleansing. I let it fall over me. For a moment, I couldn't tell what was rain and what was emotion. A local reporter, likely assigned to cover the wedding for a lifestyle section, was standing under an awning. She lifted her camera as I stepped into the downpour. A gray-haired father, half-deaf from his own son's violence, walking out of his son's wedding alone. The photo appeared in the local stories section 2 days later. Caption, "The father who walked away." I looked at it for a long time, and I understood something. Sometimes walking out of a door is not defeat. Sometimes it is the last quiet, dignified victory a person can still claim. Justice never arrives with thunder. It does not roar. It does not announce itself. It comes quietly at the flat slap of paperwork on an interrogation table, in the scrape of a pen crossing a name, in short questions that cut deeper than knives, and sometimes in a single exhale from people who know the truth came far too late. 3 days after the wedding catastrophe in Franklin, everything moved fast, much faster than any piece of music I've ever played. On March 8, 2025, a black police cruiser pulled up in front of Madison's house. 2 officers stepped out. One read the arrest warrant: elder abuse, assaulting his own father, identity theft, forging signatures to withdraw money, federal financial fraud using my social security number. Ethan didn't scream this time, didn't flip tables, didn't perform. He just stood there, hands extended quietly, letting them lock the cuffs around his wrists. A neighbor later told me he asked only one question: "Did my father sign the complaint?" And the officer replied, "No. You signed your own fate." I could picture Ethan's face hearing that, not angry, not hurt, just hollow. The look of someone meeting true consequences for the first time in his life. The next day, Tony Russo was arrested in Cleveland. The task force found his debt ledger, his gambler list, archived messages from Ethan and Russo's promise: "Get your dad to sign and your debt is gone." A detective told Sarah privately, the kid didn't know who he was dealing with. Russo is no one's friend. Ethan had chosen the wrong man to owe, and I had chosen the wrong years to stay silent. But truth once spoken does not go back into the dark. The interview room where families break and heal. I sat in a secondary interview room, the one reserved for witnesses. Softer lighting, gray walls, a single buzzing heater. Outside the door, I could hear the faint tapping of pens, the low murmur of officers, the slow drip of justice settling into place. Sarah stepped in. No folder, no clipboard. Just the steady eyes of a woman who had seen too many families torn apart to be surprised by anything anymore. "Cliff," she began gently, "what happened today isn't a victory. It's a path you never should have had to walk." I swallowed hard. My voice cracked. "How is he?" Sarah sat down across from me. "He's being processed. But I want you to understand this. You didn't take revenge. You protected the people he would have hurt next." Her voice remained steady but soft. "Maybe Madison. Maybe another parent. Maybe even himself." I felt my damaged ear hum again, a warped saxophone note stuck in a loop. "Sarah," I whispered, "I never wanted his life to end up like this." She nodded. "I know, but justice isn't about choosing sides. It's about shining a light where the dark thinks it can hide forever." She rested a hand on my shoulder before standing. "I'm proud of you, Cliff. Not for turning him in, but for not running away. Most parents would have. Out of shame." I let out a painful laugh, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. "Sarah, I don't have anything left to lose." She shook her head slowly. "No, you have plenty left. You've just forgotten what it feels like. The night air and the voice that brought me home. When the paperwork was done, I walked outside. Nashville was wet and cold. Rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered with a thin, restless shine like a sheet of music smeared by water. I stood under the station awning, watching droplets fall from its edge like an impatient metronome. No one followed me out. No one asked if I was all right, and strangely, I felt lighter than I had in years. I reached into my pocket to call a taxi. A single voicemail waited from an unknown number, no caller ID. Old, faint, I pressed play. The audio crackled soft and worn like an old cassette tape. Then came Elaine's voice, warm, rounded. The voice of a woman who once held me together when I threatened to fall apart. Cliff, don't let our son destroy you. Your music deserves to be heard. I froze on the sidewalk. My left ear barely caught anything, but my right ear heard every word perfectly. Elaine must have said it years ago. Maybe the night Ethan smashed the church guitar. Maybe the fall before she passed. Maybe during a moment I'd been too lost to remember. But hearing it now, it felt like she had stepped inside that cold night beside me. Rain began again, soft at first, then steady. I closed my eyes, let it fall, and I understood fully painfully. My music wasn't the notes I played. It wasn't the saxophone. It wasn't the jazz clubs. My music was the fact that I survived, quietly, stubbornly, completely. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stepped off the curb into the thin veil of rain. Perhaps tonight wasn't the ending. Perhaps tonight, for the first time in a very long time, justice finally spoke. People like to say that after a storm, the sky gets bluer. But I don't believe that. Not because I'm bitter, but because sometimes after the storm, the sky doesn't shine. It simply becomes quiet. And that quiet is the thing that saves you. May 2025. Nashville sliding into summer. Trees finally green again. The roads still wet from long rains. Yet something in the air had changed. Not the weather. Me. The article that changed everything. One morning while I was brewing coffee, the phone rang. Mr. Barnes. This is Emily Rivera, Nashville Local Times. Before I could respond, she continued, I want to write about your story, not the tragedy, the courage. I stayed silent a moment. I didn't feel courageous. I felt like a man too exhausted to keep hiding. Write whatever you want, I said. A week later, the piece came out, The Sound of Dignity, the man who saved his music by refusing to hide the truth. A photo accompanied it, me standing in front of St. John's Church saxophone in hand wind, brushing through my gray hair. The article spread more than anyone expected. Not because of scandal, because of one single sentence Emily wrote. He didn't want to win. He just wanted to stand. And for the first time in years, I felt I wasn't bowing anymore. St. John's is small, brick walls, low wooden ceiling, a lingering scent of burnt candle wax. I brought the repaired mini piano, a few old drum kits, and a battered saxophone case I'd carried for 20 years. Father Thomas approached me. Would you teach a music class for the kids here? They need something to anchor them. I hesitated only a moment, then nodded. First class, only 4 kids. Malik, 10, loves drums, but terrified of loud sounds. Joy, 8, tiny hands, immaculate keystrokes. Carter, 12, being raised by his grandmother, Lily. 9 glasses too big for her face. They stared at me as if I'd stepped out of another world. I sat by the piano, lifted the lid, tapped a single note, F. The sound drifted gently, like Elaine's quiet exhale the first night she heard me practice. Music isn't here to be perfect, I told them. It's here so you can breathe. They bent over their instruments and played, and for the first time since Christmas, I didn't feel pain. One afternoon, I opened the church mail slot. Inside were handwritten letters, the kind people rarely write anymore. I opened the first, I'm 71. My son hit me in 2018. I stayed silent. I wish I'd been brave like you. Another, thank you for speaking up. Because of you, I finally left a son who treated me like an ATM. And the last, I didn't know where to start, but you showed me that fathers deserve safety too. I set the letters down. My hands trembled, not from weakness, from the realization that so many people lived in darkness because they were afraid the truth might hurt someone else. I looked up toward the wooden ceiling. Elaine, I whispered, do you see this? We're helping someone breathe again. Madison returns in a different kind of apology. July afternoon. Class ended. The children left laughing. I saw Madison standing in the doorway. Sunlight cut across her face, making her look smaller, as if months had aged her years. "Cliff, may I come in?" I nodded. We sat near the piano. She lowered her head. "I want to apologize. Not just for not seeing who Ethan really was, but for treating you like you were a burden." I rested my hand softly on the edge of the table. "Madison, you owe me nothing." She shook her head. "No. I want to help. You need support for this program, grant writing organization. I can do that. Let me." I looked into her tired eyes, but in them I saw something Ethan had lost long ago. Wakefulness. Honesty. A desire to be better. "Of course," I said quietly. "Music needs people willing to protect it." She gave a small, difficult smile. The first genuine one I'd ever seen from her. August evening, the church empty. I stayed late to tidy sheet music. Opening an old cabinet, I found a small cassette box, the kind Elaine used to record my rehearsals. On the lid in her handwriting, "Music is knowing when to stop." E. I sat, slowly slid the cassette into the old player. Pressed play. Static first. Soft, warm, nostalgic. Then Elaine's voice, gentle, breathy, alive. "Cliff, slow down. Hear yourself. Music will tell you when to stop." I didn't speak. Didn't cry. I just listened. In that moment, I understood everything I lost. Elaine Ethan, my left ear was not meant to weaken me. It was meant to remind me dignity has a sound. And when you find it again, the whole world falls silent just to hear it. Autumn arrives quietly in Tennessee. No roaring wind, no cracking branches, just yellow leaves drifting onto the steps of St. John's Church like memories someone finally decided to let go. It was September 2025 when I found the envelope. Plain white. No stamp, no return address. Only one word written in a slanted, familiar hand, "Dad." I knew instantly. Some things don't need guessing. I carried it into the music room and sat in the wooden chair Elaine once repaired with her own hands. Late afternoon sunlight cut across my face, dividing it into two halves, light and shadow. Just like the story of me and Ethan, I opened the letter. Ethan's handwriting hadn't changed. It still dipped downward at the end of every sentence, the way a person might write if they'd spent years leaning into their own darkness. "Dad, I heard your song on the prison radio last week. They played it during the quiet hour. And for the first time, I realized I never understood you, not until I'd lost you." I paused, took a slow breath. Let the words settle like leaves on cold ground. "I regret it. Not because I was arrested, but because I forced you to choose between the truth and being my father." My fingers tightened at the edge of the letter. They trembled not from fear, but from touching wounds I had avoided for months. The letter continued longer than I expected. "I hate myself every time I hear jazz now. I remember how you tapped rhythm on the side of the chair, how you looked at Mom while playing Autumn Leaves. Now all I hear is my own mistakes." That line cut straight through me. Ethan once had music in him, enough rhythm to fill a room. But the moment he struck me, I knew he'd lost his beat long before that night. Later, Sarah told me what had been happening inside Davidson County Jail. Ethan had been placed in mandatory anger management. Every week, inmates had to share the one thing they were most ashamed of. For 3 weeks, Ethan said nothing. In the 4th week, he spoke a single sentence: "I hit my father." The room went still, blank. Then a tattooed older inmate let out a dry laugh. "Look at that. We got ourselves a dad hitter." Another whistled low. A third muttered, "At least you hit the right person, kid." No sympathy, no comfort. Prison is full of criminals, but even there, some sins sit lower than others. That night, for the first time since being arrested, Ethan cried in his cell. Not loudly, not dramatically, but the way a man cries when he realizes he has hit the bottom and there's no one left to blame. When Sarah told me that I didn't answer, something simply dropped inside me. Not heavy, not light, just real. I returned to the letter. The final lines were written darker, as if Ethan had stopped and started over more than once. "Dad, I know you don't owe me forgiveness. I know I chose my own path, but if someday I could hear you play jazz again, maybe I'd find the part of me I threw away." I set the letter down. Autumn felt heavier for a moment, like the season itself understood what it means for a father to read words that came years too late. Some apologies arrive after everything has broken. The cruelty isn't in their lateness, but in the fact that the person could have chosen differently and didn't. That night I took the letter home. The house was quiet. The sky darkened early. Pine wind drifted through the open window. I opened Elaine's wooden box, the box she'd used to store cassettes, handwritten notes, and the earliest pieces of my music. It still smelled like her lavender oak and the faint warmth of years I'll never get back. I folded Ethan's letter, placed it gently among Elaine's old pages, not to forgive, not to heal, but to put the truth exactly where it belonged between what I lost and what I chose to keep. As I closed the lid, the radio in the living room clicked on by itself, a woman's voice, calm, steady, absolute. And now a recording by Clifford Barnes, a man who believes justice has its own rhythm. I stood there, not moving, not reaching for the dial, not hiding. The music filled the house, slow, warm, deep, like Elaine walking past me, touching my shoulder, whispering that I had done the right thing. I closed my eyes and let the jazz blend with the sound of leaves falling on the porch. That night I understood something: justice doesn't always arrive fast. It arrives when your heart is finally strong enough to hear it. Some days don't end with shouting, or court rulings, or apologies. Some days end in a silence so gentle, so weightless, you realize it's the kind of peace you've been searching for your whole life. November 12th, 2025 was one of those days. Nashville's sky was clear as still water. Sunlight slid across the red brick walls of St. John's Church, the place where I'd spent most of the summer helping children find a rhythm of their own. Today, we were opening Elaine's music room, a scholarship space built from the $210,000 memorial fund I once vowed to guard forever. But time has a way of teaching you that keeping someone alive isn't about preserving money. It's about preserving memory. Betty arrived first. She wore her old gray cardigan cat tucked in her arms, eyes already red. "Cliff," she said softly, "Elaine would be proud of you." Sarah came next, navy blazer, steady posture, the same look she had the day she told me, "You don't have to face this alone." Madison arrived with Emily Rivera, the journalist who wrote The Sound of Dignity. Madison held a bouquet of lavender, Elaine's favorite. "I just thought the room should smell like her," she whispered. I nodded. My chest warmed quietly without ceremony. Inside the oak-paneled room, sunlight scattered across sheet music, the pages Elaine and I once wrote together, the ones time had turned yellow but never erased. When the dedication began, the pastor motioned for me to sit at the old piano, the same piano with the broken F key Ethan stepped on during one of his storms. I'd kept the fracture, didn't repair it, because sometimes a scar makes the music truer. I took a slow breath and began to play Autumn Leaves. The notes came out warm, whole, deep, each tone drifting like breath from someone I once loved. And when my finger pressed the cracked F key, a small, muffled sound rang out, a sonic scar, soft and imperfect, reminding me that the most beautiful lives are the ones that survived. I played for 3 minutes. No one spoke. No one coughed. The entire room held its breath, the same people who had seen me fall, now witnessing the moment I finally stood up again. When the last note faded, the silence felt sacred. Alive. 17 miles away, inside a beige-painted prison cell, a wall-mounted radio played the exact same recording. Ethan was mopping the floor. When the piano started, he froze, the brush slipped from his hand. A nearby inmate teased, "Hey, that's your old man's music." Ethan didn't answer. He sank onto the edge of his bunk, hands cupping the back of his head. And for the first time in years, he cried without hiding behind anger. Not because he was ashamed, not because he'd been arrested, but because the melody carried everything he lost and everything he could have kept if he'd only held on to the better parts of himself. A single tear dropped onto the cold cement, and Ethan whispered, barely audible, "I miss home." The ceremony ended just before sunset. Everyone drifted out one by one. I stayed behind. Elaine's music room glowed in soft candlelight, casting warm shadows, like the final act of a life lived, deeply, painfully, beautifully. I turned on a recorder, something I hadn't done since the day Elaine died. My voice, low, rough, steady, filled the room. I lost the hearing in one ear from that Christmas Eve strike. But I found the rhythm of forgiveness again. I looked at the piano, at its scars, at the fading daylight climbing the walls. Justice doesn't sound like a gavel, I said quietly. It sounds like a song you're no longer afraid to hear. I clicked the recorder off and exhaled, not in exhaustion, not in sorrow, but in release. Because I knew in that moment that I had lived up to what Elaine wanted most, for me to keep the music alive and to keep myself alive. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that your voice matters, that your boundaries matter, that your dignity matters, then I'd love for you to stay with us. Like this video if you believe no one, not a child, not a spouse, not a soul, has the right to take your peace. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your stories, your strength, your survival, they help others feel less alone. Share this video with a friend who may need a reminder that walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. And if you want more stories about justice finding its rhythm, truth rising through the cracks, and people reclaiming their lives with quiet strength, subscribe to the channel. Every week we tell true-to-life stories that honor women who've carried too much, loved too deeply, and finally learned to choose themselves. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, the world gets quieter when you start living in your truth.